So today I'm speaking to Ben Paszkowec, who's a former West Brom football player. How's it going, Ben? You okay?
Yeah, all good. Looking forward to getting into it.
Awesome, me too. Well, thanks for joining me. So talk to me then. So how are you at the minute? How's life for you?
Yeah, it's all good. It's I don't really know where this year's gone. To be fair, I started a new business with a friend in January. So yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster up until now. So yeah,
Awesome. Love that. Love that. Talk to me about well, we'll touch on the business a bit later on because I'm looking forward to chatting about that.
yeah.
So obviously you used to play for West Brom. You played at a decent level.
hmm
Um, kind of, what was your transition like? How was that for you? What experience did you go through during that time?
Yeah, so I guess I was just like any other boy growing up. Once you realise that you were decent at football, and it becomes part of your life, and it was my dream, like a
Mm,
lot of kids. And when I left school, I signed for West Brom. Initially signed scholarship forms, and you just obviously you think you're well on the way to realising your dream, playing in the Premier League. They'd been promoted, gone back down, and then gone back up. So I was at the club during that time, and yeah, it was up and down. I was doing well, played for the reserves as it was then. There was no under 21s, so
yeah.
probably giving away my age a little bit there. But yeah, 18, 19, got called into the manager's office and basically was told that I wasn't in the plans going forward. And although that you see other people getting released around you and that kind of stuff, you never actually think that it's going to be you. And again, a common story. It's all that I knew. It was who I was. It was everything that I wanted. So I hadn't even considered, a life away from the game.
Mm,
I'd left school with three GCSEs. I hadn't engaged in the college part of the scholarship that they offer you. So I was literally walking away from the club with nothing basically.
mm,
I went to the exit trials that you have. So you go to Lily Shaw
yeah.
with the players that have been released from the Premier League, and you have these games and hope that you're going to get scouted. And I had a few offers, went on a couple of trials, but once you've had that one knocked back and then another one and then another one, it gets harder and harder.
Mm,
So I actually remember I've been on two trials. I've been to Kidderminster Harriers, and then I've been to Bournemouth when they were way down the leagues back then. And then both of those were unsuccessful, and I was due to go to Notts County.
mm,
Um, and I was just so deflated by that point. Confidence was at an all-time low. And I remember leaving. I'd lived in digs at West Brom, so I'd moved back to my mum and dad's.
mm.
Said goodbye in the morning to parents, and then I drove to this road that I knew was going to be really busy. Basically, phoned the people up at Notts County and were like, "I've had to pull over. I've got a flat tire. Don't think I'm going to be able to make it."
Mm,
Because I just couldn't face going in again and potentially, getting knocked back. And
right.
it felt easier to make up an excuse than actually to own up to how I was actually feeling at the time.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, there's so many different emotions at the time. I think it actually took me about 2 weeks to tell parents, family that I'd actually been released.
right.
I think I got released on a Thursday or Friday,
Mm,
pretending that I had the weekend off so that no one knew. And yeah, you don't really. There's so much stuff going on. It's really hard to kind of navigate, especially at such a young age. I'm 37 now, and I think that I'm slowly getting things together. And I think
yeah.
back then, 18, 19, you think that you're a lot older and wiser than what you actually are.
Yeah.
You're just a baby, really, thrust into the real world. So yeah, it's really hard to navigate that time.
No, 100%. And it's fascinating that you kind of say you pulled over in like a lay-by or whatever at the side of the road where you knew it was going to be busy. So naturally, that phone call, they could obviously hear the traffic, and it makes your story more viable. Now,
Mhm.
you wouldn't be the only one that's done that. I'm sure, 100%. So, how did it make you feel when you made that call, that initial call? Because obviously that's a brave thing to do, and there was a lot of emotion behind that. And obviously naturally there's a reason behind that based on the knock that you'd have previous to that call. So was it a bit of a relief when you kind of made that call then?
Yeah, do you know what? When I look back now, and there was lots of different feelings, like grief, sadness, but to admit that there was relief almost felt that it's almost like I was admitting that I didn't want to be a professional footballer, that I was saying that I was relieved that I didn't have to go to another club,
Yeah.
because the pressure is so intense from the moment you pull up in the car park to walk in. Everything's being analysed. The way you talk, the way you walk, everything, and it's really intense. So there was an element of me stepping away in that moment and just kind of going, it felt nice. That was like, it was conflicting to feel like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a tough one. And I mean, I've had to go on trial numerous times throughout my career, and it is tough because you're obviously going into an environment that's new, fresh. It doesn't matter whether you know one player there or 10 players, it's still new, and everyone's naturally judging you because that's what happens in football, whether it be good or bad. That's life in general. But I remember a couple of occasions where I've kind of gone in, and this would be the same for everyone. So it's always, I'd say, one of two things or two of two. So you either go in and it's a trial game and you're the only trialist and you're playing with players who are already signed at the club, or it's just a team of trialists. And I think the team of trialists one's more difficult because everyone's going to be more selfish. Especially if you're not fit as well. So I remember going on trial a couple of times where I hadn't kicked the ball for like weeks, and you're literally going in and you're just hoping that you either don't get injured or you don't play badly or both. So it's very tough. And from the outside looking in, I don't think people understand or maybe appreciate how difficult that can be. And you definitely do need thick skin to survive in that environment alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely experienced those scenarios as well. I completely agree. When there's a whole team of trialists, it makes it really difficult because everyone's out for themselves.
Yeah,
And it's really hard to gel and to mix and to get the best out of each other, really.
yeah, definitely. So during that time then, when you're kind of going on trial and thinking about what next and like telling your parents and delaying that kind of conversation, did you get any help at all from maybe friends, family, ex-teammates, or anyone at all?
It was a mixture. There was help. I think there was an element of me not wanting to accept help.
Mm,
That meant me properly opening up then. Like, I didn't want to tell anyone how I really was feeling. I put a brave face on it. Didn't want anyone to know that I was really upset. There was every club had like a head of education and welfare.
mm,
So the staff wasn't as big as it is now. So I remember I had to go back to the club to kind of make sure that everything was final and official. I remember sitting in an office with him, and I was basically just fobbing him off, saying,
mm,
"No, no, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, no, that's okay." He asked me all these questions, and
mm.
people can only provide you with support if you want to take it.
Correct.
Um, I just again, I'd gone back into the training ground, and I just wanted to get out as quick as possible because it was very evident that I wasn't a player anymore.
Yeah. Mm,
You know what that world's like; it moves on extremely quickly,
mm.
and it's amazing how somewhere that feels so normal and familiar, a month or so later, can just feel completely alien.
Definitely.
Um, so yeah, I just wanted to get out of there. Girlfriend at the time, again, I was putting on a brave face, trying to make out as if it was all okay, because I guess that's the environment that I'd been in. You
Mm,
didn't show any weakness, you didn't ask for help, because if you showed any kind of chink in your armor, that might have meant that you weren't in the team, you weren't going to get a contract, you weren't going to fit in, you weren't going to be accepted by the big characters in the changing room. So I guess I was just playing up to type that I was used to, really.
yeah, and I think I'd probably say 99.9% of athletes or former footballers have done that kind of mask their emotions just because, especially back in the day, I mean, I'm slightly older than you, I'm 42, so 100% resonate with kind of having to kind of mask how you actually feel for fear of maybe being dropped or not necessarily ridiculed, but kind of alienated, because it's like a two-way thing. That I suppose maybe they wouldn't know how to react towards you feeling like that. The resources weren't necessarily there. The level of understanding weren't there, and I think it's changing now. But there's still an element of that naturally. I think because of social media and kind of mental health awareness being more prevalent, I think people are more kind of open to coming out and expressing how they feel, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. In terms of, so with that in mind, then, do you think retirement should be approached in a different way?
Yeah, well, I think the conversation should be started a lot earlier. I think there's a misconception that admitting that you're going to retire one day, or that to look outside of the game whilst you're still playing, is going to take away from your performance or your commitment to it.
Yeah.
But I found that to be the opposite. I mean, one of the roles I ended up doing a few years ago was helping mainly Olympic athletes transition into business roles. And a lot of those Olympic sports didn't have the funding, so they actually had to have another job whilst competing. But these some of them were like qualified lawyers, but they were also gold medalists. So what that tells us is that you can engage in a career but still have the dedication in training to go and actually win a gold medal at competition. So yeah, I think there's a misconception, and I think there's you see a lot of media today, and there's a lot of conflicting messages. So you have like your high profile players like Marcus Rashford, for example. Like last season, when he's playing really well, he's scoring lots of goals. No one's really talking about what he's doing off the pitch, his business interests, his whatever it may be. But as soon as he starts not performing, then everyone's going, "Oh, he shouldn't be. He should be concentrating on football. He shouldn't be doing this. He shouldn't be doing that." You know, I recently watched the David Beckham documentary as well, and there was a load of flack for all the stuff that he was doing off the pitch, and it was almost as if like Gary Neville was a little bit like Ferguson's teacher's pet. But actually, he talks about how he developed this property empire when he was like 21, 22. So he was just better at hiding it. It didn't stop him from winning all those championships. You know what I mean? So I just think there's a misconception about, you know, commitment and what it does to your performance.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the stats are already there, kind of to show that if you've got an outside interest outside of your chosen sport, that doesn't hinder your performance, or doesn't hinder your kind of time to obviously progress. Then it's going to only enhance your performance on the field. So the two can easily go hand in hand. Naturally, if you're doing something that's going to keep you up kind of every night up until 4 a.m, which is going to be very strenuous on your body, then naturally that's not going to help you on the field when it comes to your day-to-day sport. But yeah, I mean, it's something that it's hard to obviously pinpoint because there's conflicting information out there, and I still think there's a lot of elements, especially in football, that are a bit archaic in terms of their approach to kind of outside interests. But I do think it's changing, but it's just taken a very long time. Which is naturally frustrating. So obviously earlier on you touched on kind of you've got a business, which I think is great. Talk to me a little bit about kind of your business and what that entails on a day-to-day.
Well, the business kind of started when I got released, but I didn't know about it at the time. So if I just discuss that quickly, when I got released, because I didn't have any GCSEs or anything behind me, I ended up working in a factory for a couple of years. And playing non-league football, which I didn't enjoy at all. Started drinking, binge eating to try and cope with it. So, but my girlfriend at the time was going to university, and it was a big thing for her because she was the first person in her family to do it. So she kind of encouraged me to try and get to university to try and better my life. And ironically, the only way I got into university was because I agreed to play for the university team. I'd scraped some UCAS points together. And I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I ended up going to Liverpool John Moores only because she had gone to Manchester, so we were close. And there was a course called Science and Football, which is basically sports science, but specific to football.
Right.
And I thought, right, I really like the fitness side of football, so maybe I can be a fitness instructor or a fitness coach or whatever.
Mm.
But I hated it. I hated the theory, hated the science behind it. So I was kind of jumping around my first year into my second year, and I was sat in a lecture, which is actually being delivered by someone similar to me, and he'd been released at a young age and gone on to be a psychologist. And he was talking about transitions in sport and all the research around it, the impact on retirement, impact on your well-being, your performance, etc. And that was my light bulb moment, because I was sat there for 2 hours, and I must have been 23, 24 at the time, and it was the first time that I had a realization about what I'd been through in life up until that point, how things have impacted me, all the experience I've gone through. And it was like, wow, someone's telling me what I've been through, and other people have been through it as well. So that caught my attention. So I flipped everything to psychology then. Did all my research around people's experiences of retirement, release, and then went on to do my master's in psychology. And when I got to the end of that, I was like, okay, is anyone actually out there doing something about retirement and transition?
Mm.
There was a company as I'd already touched on, helping athletes retire into business roles.
Mm.
So I got really lucky early on in my career that I was working for a company, and basically looking after the psychology program of all these incredible athletes going from sport into business.
Mm.
And I was working with some really high profile people really early on in my career, which was really good for me. It was a real challenge, and I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I always had this soft spot for football and wanting to get back into football, and yes, help people that were transitioning, but also help people that were in and around that kind of 16 to 21 mark that were maybe struggling with their performance. So
Yeah.
an opportunity through the guy who delivered the lecture on transition came up at Aston Villa. So I
Right.
ended up working at Aston Villa for 3 years, with the under 21s and under 18s. And again, fantastic experience. But I got to a point where I was like, right, I've done the transition stuff with all these amazing kind of Olympians. I've done this bit with the young footballers, but I still felt that I was going through a process in myself of kind of figuring out who I was.
Yeah.
Um, and it was kind of once you open that door to really being reflective and examining yourself, you kind of can't stop. And then every kind of life experience I was having, I was kind of really analysing and thinking, I still need to work on this myself. And what I found is that I'd spent a lot of my life and football basically wearing a mask to fit in, to fit into the group, to be accepted by the changing room. And that's survival, right? That's kind of human nature. We've always done that, but the context is different now. It's a team that you want to fit into. It's a change room you want to be accepted into. But
Yeah.
along those periods of time, I'd kind of lost who I was. And on reflection, I think that had a profound impact, not just on my well-being, but actually on my performance as a
Right.
player. So I think I don't know if this resonates with you, but if I look back on my career, there's probably only two handfuls of times where I can remember games where I was like, no, that I was getting close to my best. I was getting close to my potential there.
Mm.
And I think that's where I just fully let go and was completely who I was.
Mm.
So the reason I started the business earlier on this year was because a friend of mine that I met on my master's has kind of gone through a similar process himself. He didn't play football to a high standard, but he really resonated with the different kind of life experiences of wearing a mask, trying to fit in, and so he's a sports psychologist as well, and collectively we've worked with a lot of people in football, and we'd noticed the same kind of challenge or struggle with the athletes that we were working with, not being comfortable to be themselves, and it was having a profound impact on on their lived experience on a daily basis. So the whole premise of the business was to, firstly, for us to be completely who we are. We didn't want to kind of work for a boss. We didn't want to be controlled in how, there was no kind of agenda. It was just fully us and how we wanted to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, we wanted to practice in a way that we thought would help people, and it's really resonated well with the people that we supported this year, both in and outside of sport. So we're kind of working across sport and business.
No, I love that. Love that. And I could talk all day about that. And I'm just like conscious that obviously time's kicking on. So literally I
Yeah.
could speak about that for, well, listen about obviously what you're saying for about another hour or two. So no, congratulations for starting that. I mean, that sounds amazing, and long may it continue. There's naturally a massive kind of need for something like that within sport in general. So yeah, please do continue doing that. And what I'll do as well. So we'll keep in touch going forward anyway, because I want to see your progress and stuff. I'll keep an eye out for your posts on LinkedIn and that. In terms of obviously, so what you're doing now is great, but what transferable skills do you think you've taken from football to allow you to kind of do and thrive in what you're doing at the moment?
I think the biggest transferable skill, I think there's lots. So obviously I've worked as part of teams. I know what it's like to really work hard, to push yourself, to kind of suffer and sacrifice. But I think that the foundation to all that is I'm taking my lived experience and being vulnerable with people.
Mm,
I think I'm not very good at kind of praising myself, but I think when I've worked back in football and when I've worked with athletes, I can, beyond all the kind of dry psychology theory, I can really connect with them because
mm,
we've got a relatable lived experience
yeah,
um, that you can't, I can't pluck that from off the shelf kind of thing. And I think in the past, and I know other people, you can be, I don't know, a bit worried about owning that lived experience and sharing it with people. I don't know why
mm,
there's a blocker there sometimes. You think that it's gonna kind of put people off, but actually it draws people in. That
yeah,
there's a lot people talk a lot about being vulnerable, but it absolutely works. And I think that is a transferable skill.
yeah.
And then what you find, and what I've found in business, is that it doesn't matter that that business person wasn't a football player, but they can draw on some of the raw lived experience of being a football player and then apply it to their experience
Mm,
themselves. And it connects you and it makes the work that you do going forward there so much more intense, I guess.
mm. No, definitely, 100% agree with that one. Um, Talk to me then. So I'm fascinated by kind of running your own business. So what's it like actually running your own business, like the highs and lows, and kind of trying to get those new clients in and people letting you down, because naturally that's what people tend to do.
Yeah.
It's just human nature.
Yeah, I think creating your own structure is a challenge, especially going from being an athlete where your whole week is structured for you. You're told
Mm,
where to go, what to wear, what to eat, etc. So that's, to have full control over that is a real challenge. But I think working with someone else is a real positive thing. I had a big thing about wanting to do things by myself,
mm,
wanting to go into business by myself. Again, kind of not wanting to ask for help, but
mm,
actually doing it with other people is, one, it's so much more enjoyable, and you plug each other's weaknesses.
mm,
So things that I'm terrible at, he's good at, and vice versa. Probably the biggest thing for me this year is you have to take on multiple roles. So for most of this year, I haven't been a psychologist. I've
right.
been a business development manager. I've been a marketeer. I've been a content creator. You name it, and I've done it. And it's been some of those have been really uncomfortable, and I've had to, yeah, challenge myself in different ways. Reveal things about myself that I've probably wanted to kept, still, wanting to hide.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been a challenge.
Amazing, mate, amazing. And all those things that you kind of find difficult, that's where you learn about yourself. And once you've achieved it, it's like, okay, well, that's another like string to your bow. That makes sense. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
what about, so I do know that obviously you've got your own business, it's doing really, really well. How long did it take? And it's probably, I don't know how easy or difficult it's going to be to answer this, but how long did it take for you to kind of launch the business from like inception up until kind of launch day?
Yeah, it was a good couple of years. Because we knew, me and my business partner, we knew we had something.
Mm,
It was about, the biggest thing was giving yourself permission to go and do it.
yeah.
Um, Again, it kind of, I think about relaying it to your self worth. You know, I've consulted for different companies. I've collaborated with different people, but there was all, I've worked with big athletes, but there was always this kind of thing in the back of your mind of like, even though you've got that evidence, it was still a little bit like, who do you think you are to kind of do that yourself? Are you going to get any traction? So
Mm,
there was a bit of grappling with that personally.
mm,
Um, but then once you kind of got over that, it was just the biggest challenge that we found was trying to get our ideas, which were like massive,
mm,
and try and condense it into something that was more specific to sell.
mm-hmm.
That's the biggest challenge. So that's taken the longest amount of time.
Right. That's interesting. Interesting. So just to go back, kind of, I know you went to uni. And you obviously got, I think, one or two degrees, if my research serves me correctly. So congrats for that. I always like to ask, like anyone who's been a sports person and then gone back to like the classroom, so to speak. What was that like for you going back into that classroom? Was anyone aware that you were a former footballer, and if so, how did that make you
Um, it was really difficult because I wouldn't have called myself academic,
feel?
but there must be something in there because, like you say, I've got 2 degrees now, so it wasn't that far away from me.
Yeah. Mm,
Um, People knew eventually, but because I had started drinking and eating, I
mm,
didn't look like a footballer anymore.
right.
So I almost felt embarrassed to say that I was a footballer,
Right.
because of my physical appearance at that particular time.
Okay.
Um, and I'd gone from being known as the footballer from a small town where you're elevated, whether you
Mm,
ask for it or not. And you'd be lying if you didn't say that you enjoyed that, that people looking at you and talking about you. But yeah, being overweight, playing non-league football, not being at a Premier League club, it was, yeah, I guess it was a bit of an identity crisis more than anything.
yeah.
So yeah, whereas perhaps before I would have been like, yeah, no, I'm a footballer. It was more like, oh yeah, no, I used to play. Oh,
Mm.
you still play now, do you? You don't look like you do, and it's like, yeah, I know.
Mate, no, I can imagine. I can imagine the scenes there. I mean, that would have been quite tough to deal with. But obviously, you've come through that now. You're on to better things. Um, so going forward, then, do you think? I mean, do you think more help's needed for athletes? Let's talk about footballers then. Do you think more help's needed for footballers at whatever age when it comes to kind of approaching retirement transition?
Yeah, I think there's a misconception about football given the amount of money that's in the game.
Mm,
But that's only like the top percent of players that will never have to work again. But
yeah.
even if you think about that, you only have to look at the stats of, bankruptcy, divorce, etc. So
Mm,
I think even those players that have earned a lot of money and on paper don't have to work again, I think they need to replace it with something meaningful,
mm,
uh, purely for their well-being. More
yeah.
than anything. If you're talking about, let's say your long career, you might
Yeah.
get to 30, kind of age that I am now, and retire. You've still got the rest of your life ahead of you. That's a very long time to live.
Yeah.
Um, so I think more needs to be done. I think we spoke about it early on about, kind of linking it with how it can help you perform, not just about what's going to happen at the end of your career. I think there's still a lot of education that needs to be done in academies because, like I said, you see the numbers, you know the failure rate, but you never think it's going to be you. And kids are in academies for a long time today. You know, you're talking 6, 7 years old until, 18, 21. So, and they spend a lot of time away from the real world. So I don't know if there's something around integrating more with the real world to soften the blow.
Yeah.
I think there's some really good models out there. So like rugby and cricket, for example, have got really good programs on the go. Each have personal development managers that basically develop players off the pitch, whether that be with degrees or helping set up businesses. So I just think it needs to be spoken about more. It needs to be celebrated more.
Yeah.
It would be great if the people that are high profile, like your Marcus Rashfords, for example, what they're doing is celebrated and not necessarily attacked every time they have a bad game.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, that's a great insight. So moving forward then, have you got any advice for kind of any professional athlete who's kind of maybe thinking about like transitioning away from their chosen sport, or maybe just starting out and kind of they're not even thinking about it. They could be 10, 15 years away on paper before they retire. Have you got any advice in terms of how they should maybe approach transition from sport to another career?
Yeah, I'd say just kind of be curious. I think it's so intense that you kind of, by default, you start giving up a lot of who you are, a lot of things that you enjoy. For example, I used to like playing the guitar and reading for the joy of it, but I kind of gave those things up. But what that sends a message to you, I think that it's okay to start giving up who you are to be solely focused on being you, the footballer. So I think just being curious about the most simple things in life and just exploring hobbies and interests away from the game, it really doesn't mean that you're not committed to being a football player. And there's actually some really, rigorous research around the benefits of it, especially around identity. So if you're solely focused on being the football player, what happens when you're out of the team? What happens when you get an injury? Let's forget about transition for the moment. If you're still playing and the game that is completely who you are is taken away from you because you're not in the team, you're not, you're injured, which is very likely as a player. It's really hard to avoid those things. If you've got something alternative to kind of soften the blow to turn to in those times, then it's a good chance that that your well-being isn't going to suffer, and therefore that your performance isn't going to suffer, because there's a huge link between your well-being and how you are off the pitch to what's going on the pitch. So I think just to remain curious and open-minded, and never kind of close the door on anything.
Awesome, mate. That's great advice.
Sorry, just you kind of what the change room's like. You might tell someone that you're doing something and you might get ridiculed for it or the piss taken out of you, but ultimately, you know that other people in the change room they're going to have the same curiosity, but they don't want to admit it within the group.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe you could be the person in the change room that kind of unlocks it for other people to go and explore different things, and it can be a collective thing.
100%, definitely. And there's reel off about 3 or 4 things there that kind of resonate with myself, and I'm sure would resonate with a lot of the people that are going to be listening to this moving forward. So, no, I really appreciate that, and appreciate your time as well. I've really enjoyed the chat. It's been really, really insightful to obviously understand and hear a little bit more about kind of your story. In terms of your business, just let us know again what you do, the name of the business, where we can find you, whether it be on social media or the website.
Yeah, so we're called Map Performance. So our website is mapperformance.co.uk. We're both performance and sport psychology consultants, so we work across sport and business. We've got a LinkedIn page, Map Performance. So yeah, you can find us there. Email addresses are on the website. So yeah.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. And I'll be keeping an eye out, like I said before, continue all the great work that you're doing, and really appreciate your time. Thank you, Ben.
Cool. Thanks very much for having me. And yeah, I think it's great the space that you created for, for people to come on and share experiences, because I think, the more people talk, the more it gives permission for other people to kind of, explore themselves as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Great, mate. Thanks for the feedback, and again, thanks for your time.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
See you later.